be with us and to talk to our friends here in Worcester, Massachusetts. And hope you're well, and we look forward to hearing you.
Yeah, I'm just thank you, Jim or Demetrios, whatever you want to call, whatever. Lincoln. We're on early, so we had a few wines to discuss.
That's right.
But I want to thank you guys all for coming. I am in a very interesting part of the world. Well, I'm sitting in quarantine in Chile. Actually, I just got out of quarantine yesterday. I passed my COVID. We've all been vaccinated. I don't know if you know, that's pretty big in California. So I've already been vaccinated, so I'm able to travel. So tonight, I'm sitting on the coast of Chile. The sun's setting. I've had a couple of beers down at the beach, hence my glow, but not like the glow like Vic and Demetrios in front of me, who've got the hallowed glow right above them, which I find really intimidating. So it's not everyone can sit behind the Last Supper. So I'm not from North Dakota, like many people think. I am from New Zealand. I left New Zealand in 1984, went to Australia because they think the New Zealanders moving to Australia increased the IQ of both countries. Came to California in 1989 the first time, and went to Chile the first time in 1990, and I'll probably tell a few stories about that. I was a corporate winemaker for 25 years, and in 2008 I went out on my own. So today I consult, and that's why I'm sitting here in Chile, Argentina, and I also work in New Zealand and Australia, of course, and California. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got a, if it'll let me do it for a second. Sorry. I've done this so many times today. So if I can get rid of this screen, share sound, slideshow. Beginning. So yeah, basically I'm a tractor driver. My second degree is in organics and biodynamics. My third degree is in viticulture. My fourth degree is in enology. But basically, I enjoy driving tractors. I still enjoy being in the vineyard. That's really where I'm home. But today I live in Napa, Sonoma. This is my own vineyard in front of my house. These I was telling the story that, you know, the average white guy lives to 84, but I'm 58, so I've got 17,900 bottles of wine left to drink in my life. And luckily, so that's why you don't want to drink a bad bottle of wine, because that's like throwing a good bottle of wine against the wall. But luckily, I've had 9 people in my bubble. I have 5 children. So I'm well ahead of the curve, drinking 4 to 5 bottles of wine a night. And I still don't understand why my HDL is so high, but I'll have to keep struggling on through. But these are, so 4 of my children live at home. Chelsea, my oldest daughter, she actually has a husband living with us. Kate's not with us. She just lives a little bit to the south because she's a vet. These are the wines that we're going to be talking about tonight. So we're going to lead off with Singing Tree, which we were talking about earlier, and then we'll roll into a bunch of reds. So the first wine that we're going to look at is this one here on the left. We make 2 wines called Singing Tree. One's from the Russian River, which is a larger volume, which you're trying from a bigger vineyard. And then we also make a reserve wine called Dutton. Now, typically I'd be sitting here in the center of the universe, which is 1 hour north of the Golden Gate Bridge in a town called Healdsburg. We have 280 wineries there. It's a beautiful place. It's the Alexander Valley to the north. We have Chalk Hill to the east, Dry Creek to the west, which is where I live, and Russian River to the south. And the vineyard you're tasting today is the Singing Tree Vineyard, which comes from the southern part of the Russian River. It's one of the coldest parts. It's in the Sebastopol Hills. And what makes it unique? Well, firstly, the name of the vine, wine comes from this tree. And these birds just fly like crazy. I took some really good videos before I left, but I didn't have time to load them. Trust me, the whole sky just turns black with these trees. Now, the problem with Chardonnay today is that they all taste the same. So, and I'm sure you've witnessed that. And if I hear somebody describe my wine as white peach, I'm probably going to shoot them, or an apple, I'll probably shoot them even harder. So it's, the problem is there's going to be 2 things I'm going to explain a little bit more detail on. The first one is going to be this thing about field selection. And basically what we're talking about here is an old vine Chardonnay. So in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we used to, as winemakers, we'd go into a vineyard and we'd taste the vines, and each vine would be a little bit different, because it wasn't like you went to the nursery like you do today and and you can buy a plant. We had to make our own plant. So we would take out, there's two parts to a plant. I'll come off here for a second. So there's two parts to a plant. There's what we call the rootstock, and there's what we call the scion, S-C-I-O-N. So the rootstock, when you go buy a peach tree or an apple tree or whatever, you'll notice there's two pieces to the plant. And that's because we use a rootstock, because these rootstocks are more drought tolerant. They can live with nematodes and other insects in the soil, and they have good compatibility with the top of the tree. Okay, this was cool. So we used to go out to the vineyard and we used to say, hey, you know what, this Chardonnay tastes a little bit more melon, this one tastes a little bit more pineapple, this one tastes a bit grassy and citrusy, and then we'd mark those vines, and we would take all the cuttings from those particular vines, and we could make a tropical tasting Chardonnay, or a grassy tasting Chardonnay, or a citrusy tasting, whatever you wanted. But in 1989, 1990, we discovered that the French had told us a lie, that the rootstock we were using was not what we thought it was. So there's two forms of vitis. Hang on to your seats, guys. I'm going to give you a little genus here. So there's Vitis vinifera, Chardonnay, Cabernet, Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, everything you know, and Vitis vinifera. Vitis labrasca. What am I talking about? Vitis labrasca, which is rupestris and Viandelieri and St. George. So these rootstocks are resistant to phylloxera. But the French had lied, and they told us that that's what we were actually using, when in fact we weren't. They had blended a bit of Vitis vinifera into the rootstock, and so when we put these field selections on top, they were related. They were like, you know, when you go to family reunions to pick up chicks. I mean, they were related to each other, and so there was good compatibility. However, in 1989, when we had to change our rootstocks, and we would take these field selections and put them on the new rootstock, and guess what happened? We got virus, we got leaf roll, stem pitting, corky bark, and all these other things. And when you're paying $250,000 an acre to buy a piece of land, $50,000 an acre to plant it, $10,000 an acre to run it, $100,000 to put in the drainage, and $50,000 over 10, $5,000 an acre for the electricity just to pump the water there. This is expensive stuff. So the scientists said, look, we can solve this problem. And this is where cloning came around. So today you'll hear people talk about the Dijon clones of Chardonnay, the UC Davis clones of Chardonnay, the Espargette clones of Chardonnay from Italy. And basically the definition of a clone, maybe hard for some of you, is you know who your mother is. You can track everything back to one plant. So how diverse is that? I mean, Chardonnay's become boring because it all comes from one plant. Whereas the Chardonnays of the 60s and 70s and 80s came from a selection of plants. And so the wines were much more interesting. And this is why Chardonnay made this big change in the early 90s, when all the vineyards were replanted to the new rootstock. Does that make sense? So I never wanted to make Chardonnay again. I mean, I made so many, and I was at CME for years, but I also ran William Hill, Gary Farrell, Buena Vista, Clos de Bois. I mean, how many Chardonnays you need in your life? And they all taste the same. So that's why I never wanted to do it. But I knew in the Russian River, there was a couple of vineyards that still existed on AXR1, which was the original problem rootstock, because of the soil that they were on. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. So the Chardonnay that you're tasting right now is from an old field selection. It's an old vine, which we don't normally talk about, and it's on this Goldbridge sandy loam, which makes it unique. And this is the soil. Thanks, Demetrios. Jim is showing the bottle right now. So the soil is this like talcum powder, and there's no organic matter, so the phylloxera cannot live in it. This is a cluster, and if you look at a normal cluster of Chardonnay, all the berries would be the same size. But here we have berries of different sizes. And here's a photo of the vine. You can see that it's an old vine Chardonnay situation. The clones are basically produce larger yields and accumulate sugar faster, and that's why all the Chardonnay tastes the same. So if we were to draw on here tropical Chardonnay, cool climate, so if this is warm climate up here and cool climate down here, a structural wine is a wine that comes in the mouth like this, and a textural wine comes in the mouth like this. And if we were to graph that, this is pretty much where 90% of all the Chardonnays today fit. And that's why all the Chardonnay sort of is boring, because it all tastes similar. The singing tree Chardonnay, though, is a little bit more subtropical because we have, this is from the C selection, SEE, which is the melon character. And then the style of the Dutton Chardonnay is a lot more textural and fleshy and so different again.
Here in the Russian River. Well, this is not really the vineyard. This is an apple tree. But this is what was planted here before we planted grapes. And that's what's unique about the Russian River is these old soils. This is an old Gold-Ridge sandy loam. And so it was planted in 1984. This vineyard has never been replanted. And we are very close to maturity. What's unique about the vineyard is we have this soil that the phylloxera can't live in. And so these vines were planted in 1984 and they're still here today. And these are old mass selections. These are not Dijon clones or UC Davis clones that give you sort of that white peach pip fruit. These are wines that give you more mineral and graphite and great structure and finesse. And they have big berries and small berries in the same cluster. I don't know if you can see that here quite clearly there. There's some small berries and we're very close to harvest. As you can see, I dropped the berry. These wines are going to give you sort of more melon, a little bit more subtropical, but their graphite character is very hard to reproduce and is only from soils like this.
So hopefully that gives you a little feeling for what the vineyard looks like and the age of the vine and the type of soil that we're dealing with. So it's quite unique. A lot of people ask me about malolactic. I'm not going to go into that unless you guys are right into the chemistry of, but basically people ask me how much ML is in your Chardonnay. I always say, well, what do you think? Because unless you understand the chemistry, I can give you a big buttery Chardonnay. It's got no malolactic in it at all, and a wine that's lean and mineral, and it's 100% ML. But what I will say is that we are making this wine in about 40% concrete and 60% barrel. And I've been making wine in concrete tanks since 1982. In fact, in 82, that's all we had. We didn't have barrels back in 82. So I find the interesting thing about concrete is, of course, this thing we call calcium carbonate, which normally is in the soil, but it's also inherent in concrete itself. And so we get a lot more cleanliness and the structural, that gunflint. And what I like about concrete, it sort of gives you this tension. And the thing about Chardonnay, and I'll just finish here, this is the reserve Chardonnay before we go into the Fidelity. But what I like about, when I was making wine in Portugal with LVMH, Seymour is owned by LVMH and Louis Vuitton over here. So they sent me to Portugal. I go to Portugal to hang out with a bunch of port winemakers to try and, reinvigorate Touriga Nacional and make it the next big red wine of the world. So while I'm there, the reason why Portuguese, okay, these are the people I normally offend: the British, the Australians, the Portuguese, and the French. I apologize if any of those nationalities are on here tonight. So the reason why the Portuguese are skinny people is not because their economy sucks, it's because the food is really hard to eat. So they have these barnacles, they're about this long, right? You need 3 of them for a mouthful. It's 110 degrees outside, you're drinking port. I'm like, dude, you guys got any white wine around here? And they go, Nick, we don't make white wine in Portugal, man. Anyway, I'm with this restaurant, the lady comes out and she fills my glass up to here like my mother does. The condensation's pouring off it. It's 110 degrees. I'm eating barnacles. I'm like sweating, and I get that wine and I go, shit, all the enamel on my teeth is gone. The roof of my mouth is gone. I'm like, what the hell was that? And they explained to me that was Vino Verde. And that's what wine's about. Wine is about, are you hungry or are you thirsty? I mean, I can sell you 1 glass of wine. That's easy. But can I sell you 2 glasses? And so if you drink that sip and you go, and then you think about it and you go, oh, you have another sip and another sip. I mean, you suddenly realize that, man, I'm hungry. And that's why, I mean, this thing is fruit. Sorry, I don't have a Chardonnay with me tonight. This thing is fruit. This is not wood, alcohol, tannin, and bitterness. I mean, this is fruit, man. This is why beer is boring. Sorry, guys. I made beer for 3 years commercially. Guess what I'm going to do tomorrow? It's the same as what I did yesterday, which is the same as what I did the day before. The key thing about beer is to make it the same. I don't want to make shit the same every day. This is wine. I mean, we're subjected to the environment. We're subjected to the culture. Wine is the art of the practical. Can you actually take that grape and put it in that glass of and make it and enjoy it and drink it on a Friday night with a bunch of people that are on a Zoom call? I mean, it's like, this is cool. This is fun. And I find the people that I meet in wine, and you guys are obviously interested in wine, or else you wouldn't be hanging out with Jim. But yeah, no, this is the culture of wine and the people of wine and the place and the stories. This is what wine's all about. So the Chardonnay, I try to make it a little bit more mineral and have that drinkability.
No, it's Chardonnay.
Cool.
What I call it, Nick, is you have a glass and it's a teardropper. You know, it puts a little teardrop in your eye right here. The acidity puts that teardrop in your eye and becomes very, very refreshing and sharp.
Well, Jim, actually, I use my lips. I don't pour it in my eye. Well, we all have our drinking problems.
You know,
Thank you for sharing yours.
This is early on too, mind you.
Sorry, guys. It's my own sense of humor.
Karen did mention through the chat, Chardonnay is delicious. It's the early tasting showed melon citrus. Yeah, you mentioned melon and citrus on the palate. Right. Great with seared scallops on top of creamy scallions, corn grits.
Beautiful.
That's a mouthful.
Sounds drinkable.
I'm thirsty just reading it.
Well, it's funny, because when I go to a restaurant, people always ask me what do you buy when you go to a restaurant? Look, when I go to a restaurant, I order something I've never had before. I'm going out for dinner. I want to order something I've never had before, or a concoction or a way that something's been made that I've never had before. I mean, why else would you go out for a restaurant? If you're just going to order steak and chips, why the heck are you going out? So it's the same thing with wine. When I look at the wine list, the last thing I'm going to order is a label. If I've heard of that wine before, I don't want it. I'm there to experience something new and take a risk and take a chance. If it's a label, I can just go home and drink that stuff. Mm-hmm. So when I look at a wine list, the first thing I look for is a person, because I'm a winemaker, so I love storytelling, and I know other winemakers that tell stories. So I look for their wines. If their wines are not on the list, then I'm looking for an appellation that I know quite well, and there's a neighboring winery that I've never had before, so I'm going to try that. And then the third thing is maybe I'll look for, if none of that is there, then I'm going to order something that's totally bizarre that I absolutely would never try again in my life. The last thing I'm going to do is order a label. And I find it really bizarre in the US that people look for this thing, the safety thing. They go out for dinner, they order a steak, and they order a bottle of from Napa Valley. Dude, what was the point in going out for dinner? I can do that at home. So, and then I have this other, there's this other euphemism where people go, oh, dude, I had a bottle of your Katherine Cabernet. It wasn't very good. I'm like, oh, what happened? When did you have the first bottle? Well, it was Friday night. I came home from work. I asked my wife to marry me. It was a great night. When did you have the second one? Well, it was Monday night. I came home from work. I had an argument with my wife. Well, of course it didn't taste very good. It's also about where you are and what you're doing, And life is part of that, and wine needs to be part of that experience. I mean, my memory, like I can't tell you the year of my birth of my 5 children, but I can tell you exactly what happened in every vintage. And that's your memory, and wine is like that. You remember when you had that great bottle of wine. You remember that dinner that you had with the really cool people and the fun time. So it's all part of the mystery and the culture of where you are. And the most important thing, of course, is to travel. I mean, isn't it amazing that when you go to, I had this experience. I don't like Grüner Veltliner. I went to Austria and I drank it like a fish. I drank it everywhere. Loved it. Came home, same result. Didn't like it very much. So it's a matter of, it's where you are and what's going on around you. And that's important too.
Yeah.
All right. Have I gone on enough?
On to the Fidelity.
Right. So the Fidelity story is a really interesting one. So I don't have a bottle in front of me, I'm afraid. I have some of the other ones down here in Chile, but not all of them. And you'll notice on the label, there's a heart. So in 2000, a friend of mine called me. His name was Al Delorme, and he called me up and he goes, Nick, I'm going bankrupt. Can you help me? I said, well, yeah, no problem. So he'd sold the winery in a contract for the grapes for 3 years and he hadn't been paid. So I went up and I tasted the wine. I knew the winemaker, and I tasted the 1999, the 2000, 2001, and I said, look, the wines are fantastic, man. Let's just pump all the 99 together, all the 2000, all the 2001. And I called up a buddy of mine who happened to be the buyer for a small independent retailer you might have heard of, Walmart. They agreed to take 10,000 cases of this wine. We launched it on Valentine's Day. We put a big heart on the label, called it Fidelity. The thing rocked. Did really well. Until 2 years later, Bob, the wine buyer, calls me up and goes, Nick, I can't sell the last 500 cases. So I said, dude, I still work for LVMH. I haven't come out of the closet yet. So I called my mates at Ruby, believe it or not. Thank you, Joe. I don't know if you were around back then. It was a long time ago. But Joe, Joe Goldsmith is online here, and he works with Ruby. He's my brand manager. Thank you for coming, Joe. National, which was a real small distributor at the time in Indiana, and Fedway in New Jersey. And these three distributors agreed to take these 500 cases of this wine called Fidelity. Guess what? Next day, 90 points, best buy wine enthusiast. Bob, the wine buyer at Walmart, calls me up and says, dude, can I get my wine back? Guess what's on the label today? If you pick up the bottle and have a look at the label, you'll notice that the heart is broken. It's a broken heart. That broken heart represents Walmart, Costco, Total, and everyone else that's screwing up this business. This is why I support small independent retailers. And this is my lifeblood. Please support your small independent retailers. This is the only other, I mean, the future of wine is, if you go to France, Germany, Italy, you'll see it's either farm to gate or negociant. There's not many small businesses like mine around anymore. And that's why it's important that small independent retailers survive to help small guys like me, because I don't have the ability to sell large amounts into some of these big retailers. So thank you. I appreciate you, Jim.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for thanking me.
Let's jump in. I'll just show you the vineyard. It's a blend. The unique thing about this wine is that it's Bordeaux blend. It's a Cabernet and Merlot always make up about 85% of the wine. The Malbec, this wine has got Petit and Franc in it. We do not have any Syrah, Zinfandel, or Petit Syrah, or anything else like that. It's all Bordeaux varietal. So it's an extremely good value for a red blend. This is the vineyard. You can see it's all from one vineyard. So it's just a combination of all of those things. And this just got 90 points in the best buy, smart buy in the Wine Spectator as well. But what I like about it is the secret to me in a Bordeaux blend is the Cabernet, because the Cabernet is what gives you the richness and the power. And I mean, the number one red varietal in the world is still Merlot. I mean, Petrus, Haut-Brion, Pomerol is an appellation. I mean, it's a phenomenal grape. So Merlot gives you the richness and the texture, but because of the way we make it more in a Cabernet drink as Merlot. And then we pair that up with the real Cabernet that's going to give you a bit more weight. The Petit Verdot is going to give you more structure on the side of the tongue. And then the Franc's going to give you a little bit more of the aromatic. So that's how we sort of put those wines together. And I'm planting a new vineyard that will include the Malbec as well. Mm-hmm. Cool. You like the wine?
It's rich in fruit, but great acidity also along with it. So it's fruity, but without going into too much into the pronounced fruit per se. Well, I mean,
it's been.
Karen asks, is there a list of independent retailers in Arizona? I'd love my friends to be able to have it. Arizona, where's that?
I don't know, but they never shut down to COVID, I'll tell you that. They're crazy down there.
I want to know where Arizona is. Do you sell this in Arizona, Nick?
We do sell, we do have, I know it sounds really weird just after what I just said, but we do sell in Safeway in Arizona. So if you're in Arizona, you can go to Safeway and there's some of our wines there. They're really big supporters. Safeway is an interesting company because they're very, even though they're owned by a big company, they're kind of small in themselves. I know it sounds kind of weird, but so the buyer in Arizona is a wine freak. And so I've had a really great relationship with him. He used to work for a small independent retailer in Northern California, and now he runs Arizona. So yeah, if you want to go to, and there's another independent retailer called AJ's, you can get the wines there too. Mm-hmm. All right, so I've got these three wines in front of me. So I'm going to tell you two stories really quickly. The first one I've got all three of my daughters, and The year is 1989, 1990. I am living in Chile when Pinochet was in power. I don't know if remember Pinochet. Pinochet was a dictator down here. And the way he would control people is, of course, he'd cut off food, oil, and power. Now, cutting off power was a big problem when you're trying to make wine. So I was explaining to my kids how to make wine without electricity. So in 2000, the 5-6 of us went out into the vineyard. We handpicked half a ton. We handy-stemmed. I've got great photos of the very first finish that we did together. We pigeage, we punched down, we basket pressed, we hand pumped it to the barrel and put it in a warehouse. We bottled it, hand bottled it a year later, and we call it 5 gold hands because of Goldschmidt unplugged, no electricity. So in 2002, Chelsea wanted to make wine with me. She's my oldest daughter. And so when she was 2, I traced around her head and then she colored it in. And that's where the label comes from. And this has become a project for dads in particular. And the next story I'm going to tell about how the labels look is because it's become a really important project that I do with my daughters. And I've become super close to my daughters because of it. And I wish that other fathers had an opportunity to do family projects and almost make them commercial as well. So it's been a great project. So the second story is how many, and you fathers out there will know this. I can't, sorry, you guys are on 2 screens, so I can't see you all, so we can't do a little vote here. But what's the worst phone call a father gets in his life? Honey, I'm too drunk. I can't go to the parent-teacher night at the school. All right. That is a lose-lose situation because you know the teacher's going to pick on your child. And if you say something, it's going to go straight to the headmaster and a phone call to your wife, even before you get home. Well, I went along. It turned out to be a life-changing experience. They broke the room up on firstborns, secondborns, thirdborns, twins, and lastborns. I've never had this. Star signs are useless, mate. It's all about birth order. I sat down at the big boy table because I'm a firstborn. I had to learn how to do this. This is not a firstborn trait to talk like this, as you firstborns will know. I sat down with 14 firstborns. What do firstborns do? There's a piece of paper in front of you. We don't introduce ourselves. We don't make eye contact. We go straight to the task. How many firstborns here that I can see? Yeah, firstborns. They're reluctant. So I'm at the big boy table. I go, the same thing. I answer all the questions. And at the bottom of the paper, it says, elect a spokesperson for the group. Okay, you firstborns know this. You're going to wait 10, 15 seconds. If no one volunteers, you're going to volunteer. That's exactly what I did. I waited 15 seconds. I put my hand up at exactly the same time as the other 13 firstborns. I couldn't believe it. The secondborns are like, hey, could we get a firstborn over here? The thirdborns are like, what was the question? You know, they're all still talking about themselves because they're middle children. And the lastborns are like, we ordered a cheeseburger. We don't even know why we're here. And I see this in my children. So when you look at the labels, I don't know if you've got all the labels in front of you, you'll notice that one of them faces a different direction. The middle child. Because you guys know, you first and lastborns know what middle and only children, well, only children you have to extrapolate, but we know what middle children are like. They are liars, manipulators, bullshit artists. They think outside the box. And when you accuse them, and Jim, you're a middle child, right? What's the first thing a middle child, dude, that's not me. Do you know what middle children are? They are the glue. They're the lovers. They're the ones that keep the family together. And you know why? They manipulate. They lie. They manipulate you. They fudge the whole thing, and then they look like saints.
It works.
I love middle children. So that's the story on the label. So let's jump back to the screen and you can see that for yourselves. Yeah, so we gave the girls some hair because they've aged a little bit in the last 2 or 3 years. So this is where we are in the Alexander Valley. This is Healdsburg, where I normally would be sitting. That's my house, Dry Creek. The Russian River comes south. It flows over to it used to flow over to the east, and the Russian River, believe it or not, formed the Napa Valley too, but there was an earthquake and Mount St. Helena was lifted up, and that's what blocked the Russian River. Now, the Russian River flows out through the Russian River Valley, which we need about another 30 million years for, but it's a good story. And the other cool thing is we have this thing right here called Fitch Mountain, and the Russian River actually flows around the mountain. The vineyards that we're going to be talking, so the Chelsea vineyard is right up here. These are west-facing slopes, which is not very interesting, you would say, because the afternoon sun comes in that direction and cooks this side of the valley, whereas these guys are the morning side of the valley, so the morning sun is less intense. But these vineyards are on little knolls, and this one here, the Yeoman Vineyard, is extremely interesting, and so is this new vineyard that we're planting called Staircase. By the way, I was going to plant 20 acres on Staircase this year, but I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but California's having a massive drought. So normally we would have about 42 inches of rain, and right now we've had less than 9. So I'm not going to be able to plant my vineyard just because of lack of water. The Chelsea Merlot that you're tasting is called Guidestone Rise, which is the name of the vineyard because of the stone that's on it. What's really unique about it is the soil has a little bit more water holding capacity, and Merlot is a bigger berry than Cabernet, so we want to have that berry remain in full turgor, so it has a little bit of clay in the soil, and that clay holds a bit more water and releases that water during the season to the Merlot. It's not so important for Cabernet, but certainly important for Merlot. This is single vineyard, single varietal, single vintage, and vegan. So all of the wines except for the Fidelity tonight are the 4 V's: vineyard, vintage, variety, and vegan. So yeah, really cool wine. It's, as I said, the cool thing is the water holding capacity, because there has a little bit of clay, and the length of the hang time that we're able to do that, so we can really push the maturity on this Merlot. So Alexander Valley, people ask me, when do you normally drink Alexander Valley and when do you normally drink Napa Valley? And if you like Cabernet, this Merlot is like a real Cabernet drinker's Merlot. We try and make it in that style. But Alexander Valley is going to have more red fruit, a little bit more acidity versus Napa Valley, which tends to have higher alcohol. So again, remembering the story that I told you about Portugal and the Vinho Verde, when you're eating food, I typically drink Alexander Valley Reds because it has a little bit higher acidity. They're more fruit driven. And then at the end of the evening, when I'm having cheese, that's when I drink the Napas, because my palate's a little bit more tired, a little bit more exhausted. I don't get the same brightness typically from the Napa Valley. This is being really generic here. There's exceptions to every rule, of course. The other interesting thing I say here, drink now over the next 15 years. You know, what's pretty funny is, of course, California is very close to Kim Jong-un's country, and you know, when he eventually drops the nuclear bomb and we all run to the bunker, why would you take something that a winemaker hasn't been making for a while? So I thought it was really interesting that the Wine Enthusiast came out with the 40 best winemakers under 40 years old. They're exactly the ones I'm not going to take to the bunker, because those guys haven't been making wine long enough. So when someone says to you, my wine's going to last 25 years, tell them to prove it. I've been making wine from this vineyard for 30 years. I know how long this wine is going to last. In fact, I had a bottle of 1988 just recently, and 1998 just recently. The wine was still purple. I mean, the wine had really held up. And one of the other things you won't see on our wines is this crusty material here. That's polymeric pigment. You won't see that on our wines. It'd have to be super, super old for that to show up. And if you see that crusty stuff on the side of your bottle, that means the color's falling out. And you know how wines move from purple to red to brown to orange? Our wines stay purple to red. They don't go brown or orange. So if that crusty stuff is starting to form, and unless it's your birth year, the year of your first baby, the year you got married, the year you got divorced, whatever it was significant in your life, get rid of it. Take it to a friend's house, because that thing's falling apart. Anyway, just my personal opinion.
Nick,
I'm not going to show you that vineyard.
I'm Chelsea Goldschmidt.
we have a comment, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Jennifer O'Leary is with us. I don't see her. Oh, there she is.
Hi.
We
had to get the Stonemason Hill, of course.
Love it. Yeah, we're coming up on that. That'll be the next wine we talk about.
Oh, you're getting ahead of yourself.
I know. I just thought I'd put it in the chat.
All right.
Oh, you must be getting bored. I'll move on. I'll speed up.
Nick,
so what I'm going to do is
another question is, how does a wine become vegan?
Well, interesting thing, the Greeks have got a lot of things to blame for, sorry.
It always
Right.
comes to those who knows more, who know more. You know what I mean?
Correct. Well, the thing is that the Greeks invented the cork.
Never been terribly fond of.
And because-
standing
Yeah,
on its own.
yeah.
Sorry, Bill. I'm
Bill,
just
we
gonna
can
shut
hear
down.
you.
So I just shut them down, sorry. So the problem is the Greeks invented a cork, and if they'd invented a screw cap, we'd be used to drinking reduced wines, but because they invented a cork, we're used to drinking oxidized wines. But the other really interesting thing the Greeks invented was the way to transport wine. So back in before Christ, BC or before COVID, whatever you want, they didn't have a really easy way to take wine on ships because, you know, barrels rolled around and all that sort of stuff. So there's a fish out there called a sturgeon fish. And this is where it all began. So the swim bladder, believe it or not, sorry, block your ears if you don't want to hear this, but the swim bladder on a sturgeon fish is very big and it expands. And they used to fill it up with wine, tie it on the ship and sail across the ocean. When they arrived at the port, the wine was clean. And they figured out that the sturgeon fish's swim bladder had a they didn't know what it was, it's isinglass, but it actually cleaned the wine while the wine was transported. So when they got back, they decided, well, instead of doing that, why don't we just throw the swim bladders into the wine itself, and it naturally cleaned the wine. And then they figured out, oh, let's use milk, let's use blood, let's use gelatin, and they figured out all these other fining agents and filtration agents that help them clarify the wine. So I don't use any of those products. I actually think it should be listed on an ingredient on the label, but as yet that hasn't occurred. But yeah, we're 100% vegan.
I figured maybe you don't eat meat. That's why it's a vegan wine. I don't know.
No, I think people should know if there's something in a bottle of wine that's not grapes.
No, I don't disagree.
That's just my point. You know, so if you're adding something else, I think it should be listed. I mean,
as I say, Nick, reveal everything.
Okay, go ahead. All right, I'm going to quickly show you a little video from Chelsea, and then we're going to go into Katherine. And when I show the video of Katherine, I'll come off the screen again and we'll take questions again.
Okay.
So here we go. I'll just, sorry guys, I just have to rock one back.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Goldschmidt, and after my workouts, I always crave a nice glass of Merlot. So, I'm obviously drinking my favorite Merlot, the Chelsea Goldschmidt. This one is 2017 from Alexander Valley. Reminds me of back home in Sonoma County while I'm here in isolation in the Bay Area. So let's see how it is. It's the perfect wine for isolation. Drink by yourself, or if you need a glass after spending the day with your family, it's always there. So let's see how it is. Smells like black cherry and pomegranate and chocolate. Yum. And it tastes like strawberries and plum. It's delicious. I hope you really enjoy it, and I hope it keeps you company in your quarantine. Stay safe, everyone. Cheers.
Well done.
So yeah, she was in quarantine until she finally got sick of living in a 1-bedroom apartment with a 2-inch deck on the back of it. So she ended up moving home with her boyfriend. But it was yeah, we had to send her basically a dozen a week just to keep the place rocking. Anyway, so it's great to have her. Anyway, so we make a lot of Cabernet, and tonight we're going to discuss Katherine and Yardstick, and yeah, I think it was perfect. No, I've got the video for the rest. So just looking at the Katherine vineyard, it sits right below the Yeoman vineyard. The key things about the Katherine vineyard: it's Piedmont, so it's mid-slope. It's not the top of the hill. Thank you, Jim. It's the top of the hill. It's not the top of the hill. It's the mid-slope. It's not the bottom of the slope where you get more water. It's east-facing, so it only has the morning sun, which is really important for protecting against dehydration, and extremely low yield. It's cane pruned, which we won't need to go into tonight. But this is a video of the vineyard itself, and you'll see that this vineyard, this block here, is very green. And that tells me that that vineyard is producing too much canopy and not enough fruit. So this vineyard is undercropped. And this is where we make the dense wine. which is the powerful, rich piece of the vineyard. As we come around here, you'll notice that the vines are a little bit more in balance. This is a bit of a slip, sorry about that. But the vines are more in balance here, where the crop load and the canopy are more in balance. And here, and this is what we call the powerful part of the wine. And then here you'll notice that the vines are under a little bit more stress. And so basically they're overcropped. And so we drop half the fruit on the ground of this piece of the vineyard. And this makes more of the elegant wine. This is really the fruit-driven piece. The other key thing, of course, of the vineyard is the age of the vine. It's extremely old. As I said, I've been making wine from this vineyard since 1990. It used to actually be a major part of the semi-reserve Cabernet back in the day. And it really holds its color well. You'll notice that it's extremely purple and red. I always look at color. That's a really key element for me. And that really sort of replicates what goes on in the mouth.
G'day, Nick Goldschmidt here. I'm sitting here with 3 glasses of wine. And everything we do is single vineyard. And the way we get complexity out of a single vineyard, blocks and styles, or working the wines to the way the vines best exemplify themselves. So when I was young, I walked into a room once at a pretty well-known winery with 200 wines on the table. I'm wondering, how am I going to blend 200 wines? I came from New Zealand, I didn't know anything about Cabernet. And so working with a consultant, we figured out the best way to do this is to put them into families. Elegant wines, which are the soft berry fruit wines right up on front of the tongue. The powerful wine, the fleshiness and the richness. I got the best powerful wines made a blend, the best dense wines are made a blend, and we had 3 wines, all from the same vineyard, all from maybe in the same block or not the same block, but all from the same vineyard. And then we made a blend of these 3 wines, and it was the most complex wine that we could possibly make. So today I continue that process. With elegant wines, we can extract them a little bit more aggressively because we know that the tannins are at a lower concentration than the fruit, so we can extract more tannin. Whereas on a dense wine, if we made wine like that, they become too dry and too tannic. So we lower the extraction and try and make the wines more fruit forward. So if I was to drink an elegant wine, I'm going to get more red cherry, great structure, very forward in the mouth, very, very elegant, very ripe, but good acidity, red fruit, and very forward in the mouth. The powerful wine, I can immediately get it. It's more black cherry, a little bit of walnut. And the mouth is really rich, really full, powerful. Not a lot going on in the front of the mouth, not a lot going on in the structural part of the mouth either. And then the dense wines, much more chocolate, a lot more black cherry, but all finished, very supple tannins, good structure, good acidity. And so when we put the 3 together, hopefully, and it's never 30-30-30, because in a warm vintage, I probably want a little bit more of the dense component, whereas in a cool vintage, I want more of the elegant component. So it really depends on the vintage. And when I put all 3 together, we get the most complex wine we possibly can from the same vineyard. And that's how we make single vineyard wines really complex.
And this is the Stonemason Hill that we're talking about. You can see the amount of rock. This is about 3 feet down. And you can see that we have roots in the vine, in the soil as well. This just got 92 points from James Suckling for the 2018 vintage, and here's another.
Hi, my name is Katherine Goldschmidt, and this is my wine that my father, Nick Goldschmidt, makes for me. It is a Cabernet, and I like to drink it when I come home after quarantine. You don't get to see very many people, but I make a point for my family to make sure that they're all home for Sunday dinner. And when I come home for Sunday dinner, we drink Katherine, because I am the favorite in the family. We all know that. I'm an RVT by day, but by night I'm a cab drinker. It's one of my favorite cabs. It's got a lot of black cherry. It's very full in the mouth, and it's definitely one of those things that makes you relax at the end of the day, and I'm happy to drink it anytime. Cheers.
Yeah, so That's Katherine. You can tell by her attitude what middle children are like, of course. You know, it's all about the middle child. And classic example. The next wine any questions, Jim?
Yes. Somebody said, Bill said, remember the winery where they stirred an egg whites to clean the wine while in the barrel. I guess that what would no longer be a vegan wine if it's got the egg whites in there. That makes sense.
Correct.
Correct.
So almost all Bordeaux wines are not vegan because they use egg whites, and most Cabernet producers use egg whites. It's very traditional. 1 to 2 eggs per barrel would be a typical addition.
Mm-hmm. That would be trouble for us. We work out at 6 a.m. That's Matt Dickinson. Well, yeah, 6 a.m. I'm 2 hours into my dreams at that time. 6 a.m. Well, that's all right. You know, to each his own at this, isn't it? You know, we all have our own pace that we go about. Where are we, Nick? Yardstick.
Yardstick. So Yardstick is a very interesting wine. There's 2 stories about this wine as well. The first thing you'll notice, it's called Ruth's Reach. Now, Ruth is the name of my sister, and I was brought up in a very strict English household. So in an English household, when you hold your knife and fork that's in the palm of your hand, you're not allowed to put your fingers on the blade of the knife or touch the top of the fork. You always have to hold it like that. The water glass goes above the fork, the wine glass goes above the knife, and you never ask for anything at the table. People have to notice that you would like some more potatoes or a little bit more meat or whatever you want, except for my sister, Ruth. She used to reach across the table in front of everyone. So everyone thinks it's to do with water or something like that. And my sister only just found out about it like 2 years ago. We've been making this wine for like 10 years, and she just found out we named a wine after her rudeness. That's the family part of the story. The corporate part of the story is the yard. Now, the yard is a measurement of 3 feet. Now, the rest of the world has moved on to metric, but there's 2 countries left in the world, of course, that do not believe in that. And of course, it's the British and the Americans. And they can't even agree on the same size of a gallon. But what was really funny, the British, this happened about 6-7 years ago now, if you recall, the British and Americans got together, and this was the last adventure to Mars. It's very funny that we're talking here right now, but $1.8 billion, and they launched a satellite to Mars. It got to 100 feet of the surface, plummeted to and formed a crater on Mars worth 1.8 billion. The British called the Americans up and said, I thought you said left-hand thread. The Americans went, I thought you were talking metric. So let's get over this, you guys. Yard is like an old form of measurement, just like Cabernet in Napa Valley is an old form of quality from Cabernet. I mean, there are other places in the world to make Cabernet. It just doesn't all come from the Napa Valley. Now, I do have a lot of Napa wine to sell and make, but there are other references in this world. And I did tell the story in Houston at a winemaker dinner a couple of years ago. Everyone was laughing except one table. I went and talked to them, and of course, they're all from NASA. They confirmed the story, and they said, actually, the feet of this thing came out 100 feet above the surface because it thought it was already there, but it wasn't. Very sad story. So that's the name. That's where the name comes from. Now, the vineyard is from Yountville. We don't put that on the label, but it's a sort of a secretive place because it was planted for Simi Winery years and years and years ago. And Yountville's a little bit cooler than Oakville. So almost everything we do is from Oakville, except for this one wine that we make from Yountville. And it's kind of funny. I'm a little bit sworn to secrecy on where the vineyard is, but rest assured, again, it's an east-facing slope. It's actually just a couple of blocks down from Tocolone. Tocolone is in the Oakville appellation. So it's just a little bit further to the south, but on that same bench. So it's a really unique wine and not one that we make very much of. We only make about 1,000 cases in any particular year. So it's not often that we get to show this wine in a tasting such as this. This one just got 90 points in this, the 18 just got 90 points in the Wine Spectator as well. And yeah, just a really cool, quite a different wine. And then we're going to discuss Forefathers, because Forefathers is one of my favorite ones. Well, it's probably my favorite vineyard. As you saw on the map earlier, it's the northernmost vineyard that we make wine from. It's at 800 feet and it's pure east facing. Now the label, if you've got the bottle in front of you, so Forefathers means the forefather appellation for that variety in the New World. When LVMH sent me to New Zealand to look at Cloudy Bay. I'm like, why am I going to Cloudy Bay to make Cabernet, Chardonnay, Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, and everything else? When you think Sauvignon Blanc, you think New Zealand. When you think Shiraz, for me, McLaren Vale in Australia, Malbec, Uco Valley, Argentina, and Cabernet from California. So the forefather appellation in the New World are those appellations. And so that's where the name derives from. This is before layer cake, cupcake, and all the other cakes in the world. This is single vineyard, single varietal. It's not blended. These are real places. You can come and see the guy who grows the grapes. The second thing on the label is there's a pair of boots. These boots I used to wear when I walked around the vineyards at Simi. Faded out in the background is my constitution for fish-friendly farming, sustainability, organic, biodynamic, and the pieces that I consider to be important. We could talk all day about that. Really my big deal is herbicides. John Hancock's signature I stole from the Constitution and changed to my own, and Lone Tree is the name of the vineyard. And on the back label, you'll notice there's a very small picture of my father and my son working with me in the vineyard. So it's the wine that I've been making the longest on my own. So 1998 was the first vintage of Forefathers Cabernet, and today is still probably the richest, polished, but you just get this like grip of tannin right on the back of the mouth, and I love that about this wine, and you're going to see why in a second. This is the vineyard facing east. This is heading towards the Napa Valley in this direction. You can see the clusters are extremely small. That's Mount St. Helena at the top of the Napa Valley. We're looking east. That's the valley floor in the Alexander Valley, and you can see that. I tried to get a photo to show this, but in the afternoons, this exposure is really shaded, but in the mornings we get the fog. So it's a really protected site. And this is also an interesting photo too. This is a berry from the Katherine vineyard, you can see, which is irrigated. And this is a berry from the Lone Tree vineyard, which you see is not irrigated. That berry from Katherine weighs about 0.95 grams, and the Forefathers vineyard weighs 0.8 grams. So big difference in size. And so you can imagine that the skin to pulp ratio is much higher, so you're going to get a lot bigger wine out of the smaller berry.
There are so many things I love about the Lone Tree Vineyard, Alexander Valley Cabernet. I don't know where to begin. Anyway, I've done videos on this before, but just another beautiful day out here in the valley and looking at close to harvest. Today is September 14th. So the things that make this vineyard great are obviously the soil. It's a red soil, I don't know if you can tell, and it has these stones throughout it, but it has at the same time this water holder capacity, which is important for Cabernet. We do not irrigate this vineyard, even though we have a drip line. We ran out of water years ago, but you can see that the vines are still in pretty good condition. And then when you look at the vine, you'd say, you know what, it's pretty heavily cropped. Well, actually it's not. We have quite a few clusters, but the clusters are really small and really loose. Let's just look at one, for instance. So they're very loose. A lot of Cabernet clusters can be tighter than this. The other thing that's really cool is the size of the berry. That berry is probably about 0.8 grams. So most Cabernet is about 0.95 grams. That one's about 0.8. So a lot smaller, and you can imagine the skin to pulp ratio is much different. Now that berry is not ripe for a number of reasons. Number one, it's split in the back when I squeezed it, so there's not separation from the pulp and the skin yet, and you can also see that the seed is relatively green still in there. What else I like about it is just these vines are just naturally balanced, and even though it's dry farm, we can feel the leaf. The leaf to me still has good turgor in it, and it's still relatively cool. So even though we're in the morning here, we have a little way to go in the day, but these leaves are in really good condition. I'll be able to take this fruit through. I'm thinking this fruit right now is about 22 to 23 bricks, and I've just tested it, and I'll be taking it back to the lab to check it formally rather than just using my palate. Anyway, another beautiful day out here in the Alexander Valley, northernmost vineyard that I have. We're up here at 800 feet, and just an awesome vineyard, the Lone Tree Cabernet Vineyard in the Alexander Valley.
Yeah, so really unique site, and just an honor to work in a vineyard such as that. Unfortunately, it's a relatively small site and we don't really make much of it. Only about 300 cases in a good year. So those are the wines that we were going to talk about tonight, Jim. And just for your audience, if you do come out, as I said, visiting the vineyard visiting the winery is a really important piece of what wine is, and getting to know the culture and the place and the people. And you can come and visit these vineyards with me if you give me enough notice, and you can meet the owners of the properties, which I don't own. These are real people. These are real places. These are not negotiant brands at all. And we have a tasting room at the Pour House, as you can see here, which is just up the road of Dry Creek. It's a really cool place to visit because there's actually about 7 wineries that all have tasting rooms up on the same property. So you can taste a bunch of different wines without having to get in your car and drive anywhere. If you want to follow us, obviously YouTube is a little bit harder to navigate, but we've got hundreds of videos up there on YouTube. If you want to see us on a day-to-day basis, on Instagram is the best way to get a hold of us. I took a week off because I'm in quarantine, but starting next week again, I'll start posting videos of where I am and what I'm doing, etc. So that's a really good site if you're interested in following us. And if you don't support Jim, I'm going to send these guys out here and completely destroy any business that you may have with Jim, and we certainly don't want that to be happening. So this is what COVID does to you, and I'm sure that you all got your own stories as well. But it's been in some ways, COVID has been an interesting time. But I really want to thank you guys for joining us tonight, and I did record this session, and I'll send the link to Jim that you guys can jump on too if you want. It'll be on YouTube. So thanks very much, and I'll take any questions.
Nick, there are some questions. Do we have any forefathers? We are out. Vic, forefathers.
Jim, Ruby ran out. They will be in stock on March 10th, and it's wonderful wine. It's a Vic pick.
All right. So what I will do,
left the winery this week, I believe, and it's on its way to Massachusetts.
what I will do is, as it comes into the store, I will send out an email as a reminder that it's here. Nick, what is dry farming?
So dry farming is something we're all going to have to get used to, especially if we only get 9 inches of rain for a whole year. But basically, so dry farming is without water. And a lot of people talk about this thing called terroir. You may have heard of the word terroir, which is the microclimate that the vine lives in, which includes the soil, the heat, the wind, whatever's going around and around about the vine, and that all of that influences terroir. When we invented irrigation, we removed terroir. So when you dry farm, it's true terroir. The second thing is that could screw the whole thing up, my argument all up, is when I was the chief winemaker for Allo Domecq, and where I met Vic, of course, is I gave 5 winemakers 10 tons of Cabernet from the same vineyard and asked them all to make wine. And at the end of a year, we sat down and we tasted those wines. They were completely different. So again, terroir is important for the plant, but we can influence the terroir dramatically, even though we pick those grapes on the same day and etc. Whereas typically a winemaker would not pick the grapes on the same day. So you got a lot of different influences. So dry farming for me is a really unique experience of working with the vine. You're a lot more sensitive. And one thing, of course, that's really important is be able to pick the grapes earlier. They're going to be riper earlier. So we're going to make wines with less alcohol, which I find really interesting. But the key thing is the first 3 to 4 years of the plant's development, we really have to get the roots to go deep. And the way we do that is the rootstock that I was talking about earlier. We use one called 110R and another one called 1103 Paulson. These 2 rootstocks are extremely deep. They're a little bit slower to get started. They don't give the yield as quick as people would like. They like to get a small crop in the 3rd year, but with this technique, you're probably going to get a small crop in the 4th year, a more legitimate size in 6 years. So it's a little bit more expensive to farm, but it also allows me to farm with more sustainability, no herbicides, and of course I'm farming pretty organically pretty much now. But the big one is herbicides and getting rid of getting rid of Roundup. Do not use Roundup, please.
Fair enough. Nick, a question that was asked earlier on, but it came back again. Have the fires affected any part of?
Well, look at that time. What is that? It's 9 o'clock. We got to wrap it up. Thanks for coming, everyone. No, look. 1998 in New Zealand. It rained so heavily, the rivers overflowed and flooded the vineyards at harvest time. People handed their keys into the bank. 1997 in Argentina, it rained so much in 24 hours, I couldn't even get out of my car in the middle of the vintage. We've had hail, we've had snow, we've had drought, we've had whatever you want. And more recently, we've had 2017 in Chile. Do you guys remember that vintage? 100% smoke tainted. Do you guys remember that? So my point is, look, I've got a jar of nuts here. Let's see if I can do it this way. All right, there's two forms of smoke. There's the free form of smoke, which you can smell. And if anyone says to me, sorry, I get on my high horse, I've just done I'm also a chemist, and I've just done a highly technical a seminar on smoke, and I'll post on next Wednesday. If you guys want to see the link of a lot of technical discussion, tune in on Wednesday. I'll send you the link on YouTube. Bunch of PhDs, and I just happen to be the chair. Look, so this does not smell and taste like an ashtray. If someone says, oh, this wine smells like ashtray, they've got no idea what smoke in wine tastes like. It does not smell like an ashtray. For me, it's like a menthol cigarette. Remember when you were a kid, you used to smoke those menthol cigarettes? That's what smoke taint tastes like to me. To other people, it tastes metallic. It is not an ashtray. So this compound you can smell and taste. But when you introduce sugar, like we have in wine, like juice, because sugar converts to alcohol, this compound, they join together. You cannot smell and taste that. Does that answer your question?
That's a little too technical for me, Nick, but great answer.
No, what I'm saying is there's two forms of smoke. There's the free form and the bound form. The bound form clocks on to carbohydrates like alcohol, like sugar. We can remove this, but when we remove this, this releases some more free. Then we remove it again, releases more, and we remove it. So we can actually remove. I mean, to answer your question, look, normally we crush about 70,000 cases, and in 2020 I only crushed 20,000 cases because it was better for me to take the insurance. So everyone took the insurance, and so there's going to be very little we crushed 3.2 million tons in 2020. Normally we crush 4.2 million tons. So 2020 will be a short vintage. And look, the big difference in British Columbia, I work in Canada every year. We have fires there every year. We have fires in Chile. We have fires in Argentina. We have fires not so much in Argentina, in Australia. But I think because a lot of winemakers were wandering around with their Instagram posts, they made everybody panic and pass this information on to everyone. But I will say this. This is my 12th fire. I thought I knew what I was doing, but in fact I didn't. Because this fire was early. I'd never seen anyone who says they picked before the fires, Jim or Joe. No one picked before the fires because we had the fires before Veraison. So it was impossible to pick before the fire in Napa, Sonoma. So I will say that the fires were early, and the problem with smoke is that the leaves absorb that smoke, the guaiacol, the phenol, the saginarol, the creosol. When you burn a conifer, it gives you creosol. When you burn a house, it gives you saginarol. When you burn an oak tree, it gives you guaiacol. So these are all different compounds, and they're milling around. And this is why I don't want to grow vineyards next to a garlic field or an onion field or a eucalyptus field. You get the same result. But no one's, they go, no. Oh man, this is really complex. Little do they know, it's all smelling like garlic. So.
Bill, Nick, on another note, from Beba and Chris, you look like Bruce Springsteen. Why not?
Right on.
Did you guys hone into that? You guys hone into that Yardstick a little quicker?
Why not? This is Evan Education Entertaining. Please keep going. Tag team of Fidelity and Katherine bottles. Cheers.
Thank you for drinking them. Thanks.
Very engaging.
I can stay on until you finish them if you want.
I appreciate finding these wonderful people. Well, you know, it takes a team. What did Hillary Clinton say? It takes a village. I did want to mention, Nick, we were out of the one you mentioned, but we did manage to get this one in. Thank you, Vic. Game Ranch. We managed.
That's one of my. So really, I mean, I do everything in my life to make 6 wines. You tried one of them tonight, which was, well, some of you tried the one tonight, which is the Forefathers Cabernet. Then we make 2 above this. One's called Yeoman from the Alexander Valley, and one's called Game Ranch, and that's what Jim's holding up. So the Game Ranch vineyard is really unique. It's the only hill in the middle of Oakville. To the west of Oakville, obviously you've got Tokelone. To the east of Oakville, you've got Pritchard Hill. In the middle of Oakville, it's a big flat piece of land with one bump in it. So we happen to have the vineyard that faces north, which is the coolest site. Across the street from us is Groth and Plumpjack. And to just to the east a little bit more is Rudd. To the west is Silver Oak. To the south is Tench, which is a very famous vineyard, and they supply a lot of grapes to some well-known brands like Scarecrow, etc. And then next door, you've got Screaming Eagle. So, you know, again, what I said earlier, you know, Oakville is, maybe Rutherford's a little bit more famous because you've got brands like Camus, etc. But Oakville, as I mentioned, you've also got Harlan and Bond and Minor, and there's a lot of famous vineyards also in Oakville. And I think we've got the best. I think we've got the best site, in all honesty, and yet I'm going up against these brands that are, you know, $2,000-$3,000 a bottle. You can buy this for under $100.
So this one, yeah, Nick, thank you for mentioning it, but we didn't have it on the list because it literally came into the middle of the week. And Vic, thank you for making it available. It's less. You know, $79.99, $63.99. That's what it comes out to.
That's a pretty cheap price.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone that. I mean, normally that wine would sell at 85, and the Yeoman, I'd really encourage you to get the Yeoman too, Jim. The Yeoman sells for about 75. So there's usually $10 between the Yeoman and the Game Ranch. And because of the price, instead of spending, you know, well, you know the wines that I want to say, but instead of buying one bottle of that, why don't you buy a bottle of Yeoman and Game Ranch and try them next to each other and see what you like? Because the Yeoman vineyard is really unique. It's a beautiful old east-facing terrace right up against the. These are 2 of the best vineyards between Napa and Sonoma, and I make them exactly the same. So this is the true representation, trying to remove me, but trying for you to try the difference between the 2 appellations from 2 really great small vineyards. So that's really the key. So yeah, please also try the Yeoman. Great one.
Yeah, they just this one just came in. You mentioned the vineyard Tokalon, right in Route 29 there in Robert Mondavi region. And what is Tokalon? It's a Greek saying, the good vineyard. That's what it literally translates to, for those who might not have known that and those who want to know that. There are more here. Thank you so much from Karen. Entertaining presentation. We love the wines. Bob and Nancy love Nick. Wines are delicious. Looking forward to visiting the winery. Jim, that's a big question. A lot of question marks. I do have to say, Nancy and Bob, anyone that does a better job than I do is not welcome back. So Nick, you're welcome back.
You know, there's 20,000 comedians lost their jobs during the COVID, and I'm stuck with you.
Yeah, let's see.
No,
wonderful.
honey, we love you. We love you. You know we do. But Nick, coming to see you.
Yeah. You know what it is?
Yeah.
Nick, and I know you can relate to this. If you're going to sit there, present your wines, or any wines for that matter, and you're going to be like, hey, this wine has great depth, it has good body,
Nope.
balance, everything, you're going to love it. You know, people are going to say, really, what's next? So you got to give more to it. You got to give something that they can relate to. You know, why body? There's only one description for body in a wine. You know what that is?
Woo-hoo! I know.
Why? Because people can relate to it.
We can't come, we can't wait to see you.
Nick, do you
And
do
I can't
any,
wait to see you guys. Nick,
Nick-
we have every Friday night, we have a great wine symposium in store that quite a few friends here tonight, all of you really attend to, some need to attend to. And ever since COVID came in, of course, we haven't been able to hold any of these tastings.
Road trip.
So we went to this, and this is a great revelation to me. I don't want to end this realistically, even after COVID, where the in-store wine tastings are able to be put on again. So I have to think of a way to combine the two. But this has been a great revelation. I've met people as yourself, Nick Goldschmidt, that I would never have met before. And not only me, but all the friends that are joining us tonight. There are more very nice looking forward. Considering you have Vineyard, oh my goodness, all these comments are coming quickly.